Have you ever noticed how the things that you once wanted the most start to feel normal the minute you get them? I wanted to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough when it comes to growth on these platforms. You know what engagement and even semi-virality can do to you. You know, when you're looking to grow on these platforms and social media, getting things like more comments, more likes, more shares, it seems like the goal, right? It seems like the point of all of this. And I guess to an extent it is, you know, depending on the goal that you're chasing. But what I've come to realize is pursuing growth as the goal itself can quickly reshape your mindset in ways you don't immediately notice. You know, of late I've been experimenting on different platforms alongside this channel, and I've noticed a noticeable spike on one of them. You know, more engagement, more comments, and a little criticism as well. And at first it's exciting, you know, it feels like something's working, it feels validating. But what surprised me is how quickly that feeling changed. There's actually a concept for this called the hedonic adaptation. It's the idea that your brain normalizes new levels of stimulation very quickly. So something that once felt exciting becomes the new baseline. And I experienced this in real time. You know, upon achieving a goal on one of these platforms, which should have felt like a big moment, didn't feel like much at all. You know, and instead of appreciating it, my mind went straight to, what's next? How do I maintain this? How do I get more of this? And that is where things started to change. Because without even realizing it, I found myself thinking less about what I wanted to create and more about what would perform. You know, what would get engagement, what would get clicks, what would keep the momentum going. And trust me, it's a subtle shift, but it's a dangerous one, because that is how something that starts off as a passion becomes a performance. Another thing that I noticed was how it was affecting my mood. Like when things are going fine, I felt great. But when engagement dips even slightly, I felt it. And you know, that's a very strange place to be in, because now your internal state is being influenced by external reactions constantly. Add to that a mix of positive and negative comments, which, by the way, is inevitable once you start growing. It becomes a very noisy mental environment quickly. That's when I came to a realization that this is how validation loops are built. You know, short bursts of dopamine, followed by normalization, followed by a need for more. And if you aren't careful, you start to depend on that cycle very quickly. And what's interesting is people from the outside often think that hitting a certain goal on some of these platforms would feel like a lasting achievement. And in reality, that's not the case. You know, you might get a brief moment or a few minutes where it feels significant, but then your brain moves on fast. So if your entire goal is built around those moments, you're essentially chasing something that doesn't stay. Now, that doesn't mean that growth is bad or monetization is bad. But what it does mean is that you should definitely know exactly why you're doing it. If monetization is your goal, then treating it like a system is probably best. But if you want to build something that lasts, something that is sustainable, something that's rooted in passion, then protecting it is important, because these platforms will try to pull you in different directions all the time. You know, they reward certain behaviors, certain patterns, certain formats. And if you aren't aware of that early enough, you'll start to create for the algorithms instead of yourself. And over time, that disconnect builds. One thing I've been trying to do is set up some guardrails, you know, not letting performance dictate what I create, not letting the notifications pull me in, being more intentional about when I engage and when I step away. Because one more thing that I've realized is that it doesn't only affect your content, it affects your presence as well. Your ability to be present with the people around you. You know, when your phone is constantly trying to pull you in, when you're constantly checking how something is doing, you know, you're never really fully where you are. And that's the cost that's easy to ignore in the moment, especially when this is something that only gets more intense. Technology is getting better at holding attention. Algorithms are getting better at understanding behavior. So if you're building on top of that system, you're essentially interacting with it from both sides, both as a consumer and as a creator, which makes it even more important to be careful. So the message I want to leave for you and for myself, if growth is something that you're chasing, make sure to not lose yourself in the process, because having experienced even a small version of it, it's not as lasting as it looks from the outside. What does last is your ability to keep showing up, to keep creating something that feels true to you, to build something that you can sustain and not just scale. So I guess this video is also a reminder to my future self. If this channel grows, I want to be able to come back to this video as a reminder for why I started. Not for validation, it's not for the numbers, it's to document my thoughts, my growth, and the process of figuring things out. And if along the way it resonates with even a few people, that's more than enough. So, thank you for listening as always. I'll see you guys next week.